Good morning or good evening, everybody. Hope you all are doing well and safe. Welcome to the webinar. My name is Girish Balola. I'm the founder and CEO of GenNext Education. I appreciate you taking the time today to come visit with us. As you know, obviously we're dealing with a pandemic and a crisis. There's been a lot of questions about study abroad, your opportunities to study here in the US or in Canada or other countries. There have been a lot of concerns that have been coming to us lately. And so what we thought we would do is to present to you some of our thoughts and answer as many questions as we possibly can. So I, again, appreciate you coming to the webinar. Um, so here's what our agenda today will look like. I'm going to speak a little bit about the current state of affairs as we see it from our perspective. I do want to give you a perspective of what the universities are facing. Like I said earlier, we have had a lot of issues and concerns that have been brought forth to us, and we want to address as many of those as possible. Obviously, this isn't an exhaustive list, but we will have opportunities for you to ask a lot of questions at the end. I will share with you my opinions and some speculations on what possible future scenarios. Again, we're in a time of uncertainty, so we really don't know what's going to happen, but I do want to try to address some of the concerns that we've heard and what some of the possible scenarios that we could expect moving forward. One of the major areas of questions and concerns that were brought to us is about the health, safety, and security of students. So I do want to take a brief moment to address that. I will share with you some ideas on what we think you should be doing next. Again, I'll keep repeating this many times. We're in uncharted territories. It's unprecedented times. But I think there are some things that we can advise you in terms of what you need to be doing moving forward. And then obviously we'll have a Q&A session. So as you listen to this and as you think of questions, please enter those questions in the Q&A section on the webinar window, and we will get to as many questions as possible this morning. And then at the end, we'll talk a little bit about what else you could be doing moving forward and some next steps. So I'll get started. So I know a lot of students and parents that we've been talking to over the last few weeks, particularly in India and in the Middle East as well, have approached this from their perspective. Again, this has been a moving target, and people are concerned about their admissions and their ability to travel to study abroad, et cetera. But I do want to give you a perspective of where universities have been and what they've been doing the last few months. Obviously, for many of us, some of the impact this pandemic has caused has been just maybe the last 3-4 weeks, maybe. Personally, for me, I've been homebound for probably about 2.5, 3 weeks now. And I know a lot of people around the world are also starting to see that more recently. But as universities, particularly here in the US, they have been dealing with this crisis for almost 3 months now. It began with the crisis starting in China, with the epidemic in China, which meant that the universities had to really quickly react to all of their activity in China, study abroad programs in China, faculty in China, students traveling there, students coming from China. So there was a lot of issues that they had to deal. Obviously, early on, we didn't think this was going to spread. But then when it started spreading to South Korea, Iran, Italy, et cetera, they also had to then pivot and deal with some of those issues. And then obviously over the last maybe 4 to 5 weeks, it has started to spread globally and particularly here in the US. So they had to again pivot and had to deal with all of the other concerns. So I just want you to be assured that the universities aren't new to this crisis and they're not dealing with this last minute, but they have been reacting and making necessary changes to this issue for about 3 months now. And we all know this is a moving target. Every day, every week, something new is happening, and some other suggestions from the World Health Organization or here in the US from the CDC in terms of what we need to be doing. So universities have had to do a lot of different things to adapt and adapt to those. But even though it's been a moving target, the universities have had laser focus on this issue, and every step of the way, almost every single day, making decisions to make sure that the health, the safety of their students and their staff and faculty is number one. Just imagine having a university with thousands of students and all of a sudden having to shut down, move classes to online, and have students who live in their residence halls who had to be accommodated in a variety of different ways. So I just want you to know that they have been prepared and they're continually preparing and reacting to the crisis and making the changes as necessary. And there have been a lot of incomplete or inaccurate information that's been shared, disseminated around the world. So that was the other obstacle that universities have had to deal with, because there's a lot of questions that come up when a piece of misinformation gets out and the reaction that they have to deal with. So that's kind of where we are. I know I've been here in the US, my state and particularly in Minnesota, we are at stay-at-home orders, as are many other states in the country. India is in a complete lockdown, so we don't quite know where things are going to be tomorrow, a week from now, or even a month from now. So let's talk a little bit about the issues and concerns that we've been hearing. And I'm sure there's a lot of questions that you have. Many of these issues and concerns that I have listed on the screen are kind of interrelated. I'm going to try and talk through all of them and give you some ideas on what we think, where things stand. And I might not get to all of them or all of your questions, so please make sure you ask those questions at the end. And I will address those questions at the end. So a majority of the questions or concerns that we've received are admissions related, and they vary. You know, obviously there are students who have applied and still waiting to hear from universities, maybe some on a wait list, some have not heard anything from universities, some have been admitted and were planning on attending in the fall of 2020. Most of those things are kind of on hold, right? And there's questions about visas, you know, because the US embassies have been shut down around the world. What does that mean for students' ability to go get a visa? And questions about not just the start time in the fall of 2020, but long-term impact. I've had questions from parents and students about what does this mean for long-term job prospects in the US, or ability to stay back after they study, the ability to even come. We've had questions from students who are currently on university campuses who are international students who are now trying to figure out what it means for their visa status. Can they stay after the semester is over? If they've graduated, can they still stay here, or would they have to go back to their home countries? Obviously, a lot of questions about the students matriculating or starting in the fall of 2020, but we're also seeing questions from students and parents who are planning on starting next year or the year after. There have been questions about scholarships. There have been questions about transcripts and statements from the banks, which are required for admissions here in the US. There have been questions about start dates and questions about whether students can defer their admission if they decide to. So there's a lot of those things that have been coming around. And then obviously the visa issuance, I mentioned earlier, the embassies have been closed. So let's go through those a little bit really quickly. I'll highlight some of those things. But at this point, honestly, there's so much unknown. I really don't know. A lot of universities still don't know as to what might happen. And when they have started to work on these things, obviously the current concern is about students who are on campus right now, particularly the international students, the accommodations for them. Every single day there's a new guidance or a rule change that comes from the US government in terms of what F1 students can expect in terms of their legal standing here in the US. So again, it's a moving target. So some of the questions that we've had from students that we've been talking to, I will address later, but let me just say this to begin with. The universities are focused on making sure that your admissions, your applications are handled properly. Imagine the kinds of questions they have to deal with right now, because if you have a question that you're sending an email to the universities, imagine 1,000 such questions coming from 1,000 such students around the world. And right now, the universities are also on lockdown. So a lot of people are working from home. So you have to also understand that some of the work that they're doing is also complicated because people are working from different locations and trying to kind of get through it. So again, like I said, I'll address all these questions in a little bit, but let's keep going on and talk about possible future scenarios. All right. So this is personally my own best case, worst case scenarios as I think about it. Again, we don't have a lot of answers. We don't know what exactly is going to happen in the next few days or weeks or months. But what's the best case scenario? We will have things back to normal soon, hopefully over the summer, maybe in the next couple months or 3 months, which means fall 2020 will resume as normal. But what does that mean in terms of resuming as normal if you're not able to go get a visa for your student visa to come study here in the US? Obviously, we'll have to wait and see what happens in terms of the embassies. If the embassies are able to open right away as soon as things go back to normal, they may be able to issue visas. But we also know there's a lot of pent-up demand in terms of visa interviews. So I'm not sure how that's going to roll out in terms of the ability for you to actually go get a visa interview and to go apply for your visas. So if in a best case scenario, universities do open and classes resume as normal in the fall of 2020, what if you're not able to go get a visa? Obviously, there are some options for you. You can defer your enrollment to the spring of 21, or worst case, fall of 21. So it's a personal decision that you'd have to make. Universities might also, maybe, given the situation, that given the challenges of getting a visa, might also offer online courses that you may be able to start in the fall of 2020 while still back home, so you don't lose any ground in your progress with your degree. Right? What's the worst case scenario? This crisis and this pandemic can last several months, where fall semester 2020 might not have students on campus. Course delivery might be moved to online, because we've already seen many universities finalize their summer 2020 semesters to completely go online. So they've already decided that maybe it's a better decision to make that decision right now. So best case scenario, everything's back to normal. You could possibly go get a visa, come to your university campuses, and resume life as normal. Worst case scenario, in-person classes could be deferred for up to a year. I certainly hope not. I mean, for me personally, that is a very, very slim chance that the classes may be deferred for up to a year, that students are not on campus. So it might fall somewhere in between. And again, we don't know exactly where it will fall, because we're yet to see which universities are able to actually go fully online, which universities will be able to go fully online, not just for domestic students, but also for international students who are studying, who are coming obviously from overseas countries. So depending on what universities may decide, these are the kinds of scenarios that I envision, where you may end up having to stay home for the fall of 2020 and start in the spring of 21, but not lose any ground, because the universities may make the necessary accommodations for you to start classes in the fall of 2020 at home. Again, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of questions about health, safety, and security. So let's talk a little bit about that. I just want to assure you that safety is paramount, which guides all of the decisions that universities make. As I mentioned earlier, as things started to spread, universities had to make a lot of decisions. First, it began with students who were abroad, studying overseas, who were brought back home because that was the safest thing to do. When they determined that maybe staying on campus or in-person classes on campus was not a safe thing, they directed students to go back home and move all of the classes online. In addition to that, they had thousands of students staying on campus. At first, they allowed them to stay on campus. When things got a little bit worse, and they realized that maybe having students on campus is not a great thing after all, they made accommodations to make sure those students' safety was taken into consideration, and had those students reaccommodated in a variety of different ways. So safety and security of the students and of the staff and of the faculty is paramount, and all of the decisions that universities make will guide that. So as you can imagine, over the next several months, all of the decisions the universities will make in terms of your ability to come study here or not, or how your classes will be delivered, will be directed by the safety and security of you and the other students and the faculty and the staff on campus. Also, the World Health Organization and the Centers for Disease Control are offering guidelines every single day, and those impact how universities can operate. And so as they make their own decisions on a campus level, they also have to subscribe to the guidelines of the World Health Organization and the Center for Disease Controls. In addition to that, each state has its own conditions. For example, in Minnesota, we closed down schools about 3 weeks ago. In some other states, they still haven't been closed yet. And some other states closed down much earlier. So a lot of those conditions also dictate how universities operate. Now, as far as your ability to go and get a visa, or if the embassies are going to open, or how that might impact you, that is a State Department decision. So the Department of State in the US has to make a decision about reopening all of its consular offices around the world. And those will be influenced by global conditions. So for example, say, if we here in the US somehow put an end to this crisis here in the US, but let's imagine maybe in India, it's still spreading because India is maybe a couple, 3 weeks behind where we are. So even if things go back to normal in the US, based on the conditions on the ground in India, they may not be able to open yet. So we all have to be kind of cognizant of that and make sure that we keep our ears tuned to the news and the decisions that are coming out, right? Like I said earlier, a lot of questions about, okay, when operations resume, is it safe for me to come study there, or is it safe for my son or daughter to come study and stay in the US? Absolutely. Obviously, operations will not resume unless it's deemed that it is safe and secure for every single person who's going to be in person on a campus. So when it does resume, just stay assured that your students, you personally, if you're traveling, everybody who's going to be attending college will be very safe and very secure. And there will be a lot of protocols in place to make sure that we don't see a resurgence of this. We had a lot of questions also about students, if they were to come here or if they're already here and if they get sick, what does that mean? I just want you to know that all students attending universities here are required to have health insurance, which means they are covered. So in the event that something were to happen and they have to seek medical attention, they will have health insurance and they will be covered. And obviously, as you know, we have some of the best healthcare systems in the world. All right, so what should you do next? Again, I keep repeating myself in so many different ways. We just don't know where things are, right? We know that there's a continuing interest of students who want to come study in the US. The universities obviously are committed to globalization, want to make sure they're providing the best global education possible. And they do want the students to come here. But again, since it's a moving target, on a daily, weekly basis, they're making their own decisions in terms of what is feasible. Not knowing when this will end, not knowing how it might impact summer 2020 or fall of 2020. They may not have any decisions yet. They may not know whether or not they're opening campuses in the fall of 2020 for you to come. They may not know that if they were not able to have you in person, if the course delivery would be online. So the best thing you could do is to keep in touch with your university main contact that you've communicated with so far. But here's a caveat. Please don't send them a lot of communication. Again, like I said earlier, if you have a question and you're sending a question and there's 1,000 other students sending similar questions to one person who has to respond to all of those, all their days will be spent just trying to respond to your emails, while they should be actually working with their coworkers, with their team, with faculty and staff on campus to figure out what the next best step is. So even if you do send an email, if you don't hear from them, don't worry. They're not ignoring you. They just have so much on their plates and they will get back to you. One best way to keep in touch with the university is to keep an eye out for their communications that are coming out. Make sure you visit their websites because they are constantly updating their websites. The other way you can keep in touch is with us, one of our counselors. We have a team on the ground. Many of you may have already interacted with one of our counselors. One advantage that we can offer you is that you may not be able to reach out to a university representative because of the challenges of communication by email and phone, et cetera. But we may be able to reach out because we're here also. We have a team in North America and we have these strong relationships with universities. So we may be able to understand a little bit more and provide you with guidance. So if you have any questions at all, reach out to us for sure. And I'll share with you information how you can reach out. The other thing, like I said, keep an eye out for communications, whether it's coming from GenNext, whether it's coming from your universities, whether it's coming from testing organizations. For example, just this morning that I learned that now you can take TOEFL at home, right? You could take GRE at home. So those are the kinds of changes that are coming out. Things that weren't feasible in the past are starting to become more feasible now. One other thing that I'll tell you, since I think that right now, the process of receiving the I-20 form for you to go apply for a visa. In the past, it had to be an actual paper mailed to you. Recently, I think about last week, the US government decided that it could be emailed to you. So that's a major change. So if you're worried that you haven't heard anything from your university, check your email, check your junk folders, check your spam folders. There may be an email sitting out there and possibly even one with an attachment of an I-20. I don't know, but just make sure you're constantly checking those. Be patient and flexible. I know for each one of you, it's a cause for concern in terms of where you are, whether you've applied and you're waiting for admissions decisions. You've sent in all of your information, but your application is not complete, so you don't have a guidance on what else you need to submit. If you've already been admitted and you've received the I-20, but you can't go get a visa interview, there's so many questions. So please be patient because, again, none of us honestly really know all the answers yet. And please be flexible. If things change, if the universities require you to do something in addition to what they've already asked you to do, please be flexible. Please understand that they're moving as fast as they can on a war footing to try to resolve these situations. But again, since it's such a moving target, we just don't know where things are going to be a week or a month from now. Keep an open mind, please. I mean, these are uncharted waters. It calls for nimbleness. But I also want to tell you that this isn't the first time we're dealing with the crisis. Maybe this is the first time for many of you as students who are dealing with something like this. And for even many of us who have dealt with the 9/11 or we've dealt with the SARS or the H1N1 and the MERS viruses in the past, this is, again, a big game changer. It's a very different kind of a crisis than we've dealt in the past. But here's what I'll tell you. Having been through some of those major crises around the world in the past, having worked with universities through some of those crises, I just know this. Our university staff and faculty and administrators are fully prepared. They may not know all the answers yet, but they will get those answers for you. And they're working on it. They will make sure that they have the right solution for each and every single one of you. And they will make sure that your global educational opportunity is intact. And lastly, understand that this too will pass. It has to pass. As you know, a lot of progress is being made. Hopefully, we're all hoping that there's a vaccine developed soon, but it might take some time. In the meantime, obviously, we'll all have to do our share. This is my public service announcement here to ask you to stay home and mask up and wash your hands and all of the stuff you've been hearing for the last few weeks. But we all have to do this together and just make sure that you keep your eyes out for all kinds of communication so you know exactly what you need to do next. Moving forward, next steps. If you haven't already, I don't know if you know that we provide free counseling for every student who wants to study in the US or Canada or even other parts of the world. The best way to get started is to go to iamfutureready.com and register. You'll see two links, one for an undergrad, for a bachelor's degree, and one for a graduate degree. So please click on that or register. If after this webinar is over, again, I realize that I won't have a lot of answers for you. I might actually leave you with more questions than answers, and that's okay. Please email us at future@genxeducation.com so that we can respond to your individual questions and personal questions. Make sure that you mark future@genxeducation.com as a safe sender. Sometimes our emails, especially in Gmail, ends up in spam or junk folder. We also have a business WhatsApp number, so please take this number and save it on your phone, so we may be sending you a lot of information on WhatsApp as well. Excuse me. This is the team. This is our team across India and North America. You may have interacted with many of them already, but these are the folks that you'll be working with. You can be hearing from many of them, so keep an eye out for communication from these folks. And I also want to say there are on this call right now several participants from these universities attending. So I want to shout out to them and thank them for being on this call on a Saturday morning. These are our university partners without whom we can't really do any of the work that we do. So I want to say a special thank you to these folks. As we prepare for Q&A, if you haven't already, please go ahead and submit your questions in the question and answer section. I will address as many questions as possible in the order received. If you have to jump off, I understand. You will receive a transcript of all of the questions and answers discussed. You will also receive a recording of this session. And as I mentioned earlier, I might not have all the answers for you. I might leave you with more questions than answers, but as things progress, expect additional webinars as we have more clarity. We will communicate, we'll continue to communicate with you through webinars and emails and WhatsApp messages and text messages, et cetera. So please keep an eye out for communication from us. We want to make sure that you're fully equipped, whether you are a current student on campus here in the US, whether you are about to come study here in the fall of 2020 or beyond. We will make sure that we help you clarify your questions and make sure that you're moving along as expected. So I'll leave this up on the screen and I'll open it up for Q&A. I've asked Addie in our team to moderate the Q&A. So Addie, can you get us going, please?
Absolutely. Good evening, everyone. So we've got a good list of questions coming in. Our first one centers on finances. So how will our scholarship and tuition be affected?
That's a good question. We've heard a lot of questions about that specifically. So there have been questions about whether or not if a university would decide to have you do online courses, staying home for the fall of 2020, will tuition be different? Will scholarship will be different? You know, to be honest with you, I don't know the answer to that. I don't think universities know it yet. So I don't have clarity on whether or not they may charge you differently if you were to end up staying home. But broadly speaking, if you've already been admitted and if there's a scholarship offer in place, I don't think they will rescind that offer. Whether you start in the fall of 2020 or defer to spring of 21 or fall of 21, that offer stands true and good. So if you already have that, that's great. You might also, if you're still in the application process, continue to check with universities to see if there have been new scholarships announced. Or I would anticipate that if for some reason, some students who had been offered a scholarship couldn't come or don't want to come study anymore, that might free up additional scholarship resources that universities can disperse to other students. And in terms of tuition itself, I don't know exactly how universities will handle it. Maybe because there's been a big impact to them financially, they may not be able to offer as many scholarships as they have in the past. Or maybe on the flip side, because they do want the students to continue to come, they may introduce additional scholarship opportunities for you. So again, keep in touch with the universities, keep in touch with us, keep an eye out on their websites and communicate with them. And as we learn more, we will keep you posted.
Okay, our next question comes from one of our university reps. What are you hearing on the ground in India? How are the parents in India feeling about the current situation and upcoming fall 2020 intake?
Thank you. You know, surprisingly, in the last probably 4 or 5 weeks or so, I have personally received a lot of emails from parents, both in India and in the Middle East region where we work, with questions about how can we get started on the process, and questions about safety and security for their students, et cetera. So as much as there's a lot of concern about what's going on, I don't think anybody has made up their mind that they're not going to come study here anymore. I actually feel it's the other way around. I know the parents and students in India and the Middle East have realized that we're going to work on this, we're going to resolve this issue, and life will go back to a new normal. And when they do, their global educational goals aren't going to change. And if they've already thought about coming here, if they've already applied, they want to continue on that track. So I wouldn't be worried about students and parents deciding not to come study here, not to send their kids here because of this crisis. Personally, I think there's more interest now, at least for some reason over the last several weeks, I have received a lot more personal questions about studying abroad than I ever do in the past. So I take that as a good sign.
Okay, we've got an SAT related question. How will the next SAT be conducted? And then the question goes further to inquire about how will the pandemic affect the admissions of fall 2021?
Okay, so thank you. That's a good question. I failed to mention a couple of things earlier as I was talking about admissions related issue. So a lot of universities, because of the pandemic and because of its impact on students' ability to take certain exams like the SATs, ACTs, et cetera, several universities who in the past weren't have decided to go test optional. What that means is that even though an SAT or an ACT score is required for admission in the past, for fall 2020, and in some cases even for fall 2021, the universities have gone SAT, ACT optional, which means they do not require that score for admission consideration. So they'll make all their admissions decisions based on what students can deliver from a high school transcript. What will happen in the future in terms of 21 and beyond, I'm not sure yet. But if universities are going test optional, and if they see that they have a good success in terms of the kinds of students that they're admitting, they may go completely test optional and not just on a trial basis. I do hope that some of that happens because I have my own personal opinions about that, which I'll share maybe personally. But as you plan for your application, if you're applying to universities that still require the SAT or the GRE, I don't know about the SAT yet. I don't think they've made it widely available to be taken at home yet. But College Board, the organization that conducts SAT, might be working on it as we speak, because we've seen that the GRE and TOEFL now can be taken at home with the proctor. So go to ets.org, which is the company that does the GRE and the TOEFL testing, and make sure that you know what's required of you to take the test at home. What was the second part of the question, Addie?
So it had to do with, excuse me, let me find it real quick here. Oh, I think we moved it.
I know what okay, now I got it. What I was going to say was that a lot of the questions have come up in terms of, okay, my school shut down. I haven't taken my 12th grade exams yet, or my last semester exams yet. Some of them have been canceled. Some are being postponed. We don't know exactly when those exams will be, which is obviously delaying the process in terms of my ability to get a high school transcript. What will happen? So what are universities going to do? So here's what we've learned from speaking to universities. As of right now, because it's so unique, it's such a unique situation, it's an unprecedented situation, universities more and more, the ones I've talked to, are deciding that if your high school in India or in the Middle East or wherever you are decides that you have met all the requirements for them to actually graduate you from high school, the universities will accept that as the decision. We'll accept whatever your high school or your college can provide in terms of your graduation or your diploma. The universities will accept that and not have strict requirements in terms of, maybe in the past they needed an official transcript from the university or a high school or an official diploma. They will be accommodating, given that there's such a crisis and we don't know exactly what's available and what's not, and what's feasible and what's not. This also applies to bank statements. I know part of your admissions, your applications, is to have bank statements, other kinds of financial documentation that you have to submit. You can't walk into a bank right now and get that. I don't know if you are, probably not, but maybe you can download something online and provide that. So to the best of their ability, the universities will accept and make accommodations as they deem fit to make sure that your application is complete and that they can make a decision on your application.
So another question we had, which kind of relates to Part A and a bit of Part B and what you were just talking about, was which universities are making standardized tests optional?
We do have a list of universities. We can include that as part of the transcript and the email that goes out. So for everybody who's registered here, we will find that list of universities who have now gone test optional, and we will email it to you. Last count I saw, I think there were about 300 universities that had just gone test optional. And that number is growing every day. So we'll make sure we'll get it to you.
So we also have kind of a broader question about the ways in which we might mitigate the impact of coronavirus on international student recruitment.
Okay. Can you expand on that? What was the question?
How to mitigate the impact. Yeah.
On international student recruitment, I mean, there's a lot of different ways you can go with it philosophically and functionally speaking. Obviously, right now, all of our travel has been suspended, so we're not on the road. Our university representatives aren't traveling to go visit with students, so that obviously is making an impact in terms of their ability to not only promote their institutions, but also staying home and staying safe. In terms of international students' ability, maybe in the future, while this still is a crisis, students may be staying home to do online coursework. Maybe that's another way you can impact the spread of coronavirus for the time being. But at the end of the day, this isn't going to be life for the rest of our lives, right? Over the next period of weeks, months, things will settle down and we will go back to some sense of normalcy. It may be a new normal. And then things will pick up again. I will still travel. I think our university partners will still travel to come visit with students. Students obviously will have to travel to come get the excellent education they can get. I mean, I don't know if that answers the question. I'm not really sure. I'm not an expert or a professional to answer just the spread of coronavirus from a epidemiologist standpoint. I don't know, Addie, does that answer the question? I'm not sure what the question is.
I mean, I think so. It's hard to know at this point, right? Yeah. I think that given the information that we have, these are the steps that we can take, but that, as you said repeatedly, that the target keeps shifting.
Yeah.
We do have a question on online options. Okay. So should we really go for spring 2020 or fall 2020 online? So I think kind of wanting to know which would be a better choice if that were to become the option. And I think also the added concern is being able to obtain an internship in 2021, depending on what move they make.
Sure. It's a personal decision, I think, in my opinion. It's a combination of a personal choice and then whatever the university can offer. I mean, whichever university has admitted you, if they're able to offer you a complete online experience in the fall of 2020, because they're moving their course delivery online, it may make sense for you to get started. right? If not, what are your options? Will you be at home not doing anything? I'm not sure if that's the best use of your time. So if your university can offer that, yes, granted, it's not the experience that you would have if you came and studied here on campus. But again, we're in unprecedented times, so we have to do what we have to do. If your university offers that for fall 2020, if I was you, I would take up on it, because I don't want to miss out on coursework. I don't want to stop the progress toward my degree. And I want to get started as soon as possible. So if I were to start taking classes online in the fall of 2020 and spring 21, universities open up for in-person classes and I can travel here, then at least I've made progress and I'm continuing my degree here. So that's one thing. Don't take this as gospel, but I might even argue that if that was the opportunity, if you could start coursework in the fall of 2020 and start taking classes, and then you were able to go apply for a visa, maybe say later this year, October, November, December, in anticipation of starting in the spring of 21, you have an additional, case to make with the consular officer about the reason why you should come study here. That actually would, I think, fortify your application for a visa, where you can say, I've already started at this university, I've already taken classes. Obviously, everybody knows the reason why I had to do that, but now my university is open, I'm gonna be able to go up to my campus, so I need my visa. So that's another way to do it. The other thing, and I'm gonna couch this in terms of some of the questions that we've had about gap year. So I want to talk about that as well. So again, reiterating, if you have the opportunity to take a full-fledged course online in the fall of 2020, take it. At least I would personally, and then continue on. If on the alternative, if you're considering taking a gap year and deferring your admission if you received one till fall of 21 for a whole year, be cognizant of what you do, right? Typically, when students ask me about a gap year, I talk about spending the year in a meaningful way, in the sense that if you're going to do something for a whole year and take off time from education and attending college, make sure what you do is really meaningful and impactful and makes a lot of sense, especially with regard to what you want to study, right? Gap year isn't where you just stay at home and hang out and play video games, right? I think everybody knows that, but I have to add that to it. So in this event, if you do decide to take a gap year, defer your enrollment to fall of 21, the next few months you may not be able to do anything, which I understand, because you can't go out and do community service or this or that. Maybe there's an opportunity for you to do that because there's a pandemic, because there's a crisis. But if you can't, then you can't. You know what I would also suggest? That if you were to do that, and if you're sitting at home and while away your time, explore courses on Coursera, edX. There's a lot of online those kinds of platforms that you can go take some courses. At the end of the day, if you can show progress toward your degree, even though you may not get a credit for Coursera or edX that goes towards your degree, I think it's still meaningful. I think it's beneficial for you personally. You learn more. You're going to make some progress toward that. So whatever decision you make, and obviously it's a personal decision, and we're happy to guide you individually about what makes what makes the best decision for you, or makes the most sense for you, and we can help you with that. But anything you do, make sure you think through all of these things and take advantage of some of those things. One last thing I do want to add about this online curriculum delivery for fall of 21. Over the last few weeks, universities had to scramble quickly and move all courses online. So you could assume that some of those courses that are being delivered online aren't fully online or aren't up to snuff, right? Because it had to be done really quickly. But I do know this for a fact, that universities expecting that summer 2020 might have to be online, and most probably in some situations, fall 2020 might have to be online, have already started working with their internal staff, plus organizations and companies that can help them really go online. And what I mean by that is, when they go online, if they were to deliver courses online only for fall of 2020, I will assure you that it's going to be top of the line online course delivery. except for the fact that you're not on a campus with other students, your experience will not be any less with the faculty, with the fellow students on online. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Okay, so our next question looks a little north of the border in the US. Do we have any more information on Canadian university admissions?
Okay, I mean, I think Canadian universities are in the same boat as well as our other countries. I do hope that Jimmy's still online. Jimmy is from the University of Guelph, which is our northern partner. Jimmy, if you're online, do you want to hop on and unmute your mic and maybe share your perspective from a Canadian standpoint?
Yes, I think I'm on now, yeah?
Yeah.
Perfect. Hello, everyone. Jimmy Hambach from University of Guelph here. I don't think there's too much of a difference when we talk about Canadian universities versus the US. I think we're looking at figuring out exactly what, from an admission point of view, what we're going to look at for the fall, because it's definitely a fluid situation, and there's a lot of different curriculums to deal with. And even within the CBSE board, you have the Indian boards that are trying to finish up, and you have CBSE boards outside of India that are completely closing down. And you want the assessment to be fair at the same time, right? So we're still in the conversation to see exactly what the approach will be. What I think that might differ us a little bit from the US institutions based on the information that I have received is maybe this last semester being a pass-fail semester within certain curriculums. That's nothing that's going to work on our end. And I think that's quite in general when it comes to Ontario universities, just in case you haven't applied to other universities in Ontario too. I think they do want to have grades for the last semester. I know a lot of US schools have said that pass-fail would be okay for the last semester. But yeah, I think that's where we are with the admission piece. In terms of study permits, they are still being issued. The thing is, though, that with a complete lockdown, it's hard to do the biometrics, which is a requirement for it. So it's we're going to have to wait that out a little bit to see how that progresses. If you had your study permit issued even before sometime in March, I believe it's like 16th of March or so, you're not going to be affected by the travel ban that they have. But if you apply later on, you're going to have to wait for that travel ban to cease as well. So that's another thing to keep in mind. Not everything is in our control, right? Just like Girish has said, a lot of it's going to go back to governments, etc. And I'm currently in India right now, in the northern part, and we are behind this whole virus explosion, you might say, globally. So it hasn't really taken off here yet. So I don't know what it's going to look like for the summer, but I assuming that it's going to be tricky for Indian students to travel abroad. But yeah, is there anything specific, Girish, do you want me to talk about more than that, or?
No, not really, Jimmy. I mean, I guess like you said, right? We're all in the same boat, right?
Wow.
I mean, I know there's some, like you said, accepting grades versus pass-fail. That's a little bit unique to Ontario schools than in the US, but it's all wait and see at this point, honestly. We'll just have to see in terms of what's going on and national lockdowns and the ability to travel, etc. So, no, thank you,
right.
Jim. Yeah.
And I think just adding to that, it's just important for the students to connect with their universities. And if there are going to be virtual sessions going on in the fall, then make sure that you have enough resources virtually so you can manage with that as well, because you're going from a domestic board or a completely different study environment to going to university, which is going to be a different structure, different system. So that's a big change. So definitely look at those resources that your universities are offering you. That's important. Cool.
Thank you, Jimmy.
Yep.
So one thing that I think would benefit us to address is, is any of the advice that you're sharing, Girish, would it differ if they're at the graduate level or the undergraduate level?
No, I think most of everything we're talking about is the same as it relates to both grad and undergrad students, right? I mean, we talk about transcripts, we talk about grades, etc. The same thing applies to students who are graduating college from India or the Middle East wanting to come study here. They may not take the SAT, but they may have to take the GRE or maybe the GMAT, right? So from a testing standpoint, same things apply. From a admissibility standpoint, the same things apply. If they don't have last semester grades to turn in, or if they can't get the last semester transcript to turn in, again, same thing applies. The universities are making as many accommodations as possible to make sure that whatever is legitimate and whatever the university or the college that the student is attending can vouch for, to say this is the grade or this is how we are graduating this student from college, they will accept that. So again, such a moving target. We don't exactly know. So the same things apply for their ability to go get a visa. Same things apply. I'm not sure if they've been waitlisted on any of the programs. If they have, then you just have to wait and watch what's going on. I will mention this. I learned of George Washington University is offering a program. I think it's called Flex Start. So there's an opportunity already that they've identified that students can potentially start online in India, anticipating that there may be disruption to fall of 2020 travel, visas, et cetera, et cetera. So something like that, you got to keep an eye out for communication from universities. If you don't come in the fall of 2020, do you want to defer to the fall of 21? One thing that I will say from a graduate compared to undergrad is that the undergrad programs students typically can pick up in the spring of, to start in the spring of a year as opposed to a fall year, right? For example, if you're a high school student graduating, whether you start in the fall of 2020 or spring of 21, it's not going to, the ability to take certain courses that you have to take, especially sequentially, isn't going to be as impacted as an undergrad student. But a graduate student might have some impact because they're only at a university, in some cases for a year, in some cases for 2 years. And most of the courses that are offered are sequential, where you may have to take a certain course in the fall semester before you can take a next level course in the spring semester because it's a prerequisite. Now, if you skip fall of 2020 and start in the spring of 21, those prerequisite courses might not be available or may not be offered. So in that case, if I was a grad student, I might think twice about not doing an online program in the fall of 2020. If my university that's admitted me offers it, I might consider it a little bit more heavily than an undergrad student would, because I know sequentially spring of 21, when I'm here on campus, I have to start taking classes. So obviously I'm trying to address it from a 35,000 foot level, kind of like I'm flying a plane with some blinders on right now because there's not a lot of visibility in cloud coverage. But these are the kinds of things that if I was an undergrad student, I was a grad student, these are the kinds of things that I would be doing and I would be considering and I would be making decisions on. And obviously every student has their own specific issue. We can't answer personally every single question on here. That's why we want to make sure that those students are able to reach out to us on this email or go online or register for advising. So me or one of our team on the ground can answer every single question as it applies to their specific case, plus be in a position to help those students connect with those particular universities who may not be in attendance today. Those university reps may not be here. So we have the ability to reach out and connect and facilitate a conversation that a student themselves might not have. So I just want to kind of throw that out there as well.
Okay, so this question, I believe we addressed to some degree earlier, but for those who maybe slid in a little bit later, I wanted to ask that on their behalf. Will the issuance of visas be more restricted next year? In other words, will gaining admission and scholarships in foreign colleges be more challenging in the coming year?
I don't think so. I don't think so at all. If I were to guess one way or the other, I would guess the other way. Now you have to put your university hat on, right? So you plan for an incoming class of fall 2020. and you had all these plans in place. You had admitted all these students from all over the world. And for one reason or another, and especially because of the pandemic, many of those students might not be able to come to study on campus this year. That impacts the university in a lot of different ways. So if that were the case, many of those students might have deferred till next year. But that doesn't take away from your ability to apply for a fall of 2021 class. So if, for example, if you're a third-year college student right now finishing up, or if you're 11th standard student just finishing up going into your 12th grade year, I don't want you to worry that, man, competition might be heavy next year. Now, I'm speaking for across the universities in the US. When it comes to selective universities, there may be a slight impact. If you think about it, selective universities only take in X number of students per year for the incoming class. Now, if there's a lot of deferrals, or if a lot of students who graduated this year from high school are taking a gap year because of the pandemic and applying for admission for fall of 21, now you're going to have to compete with them. But then again, 99.5% of the students don't go to selective universities. So you got to keep that in mind. I don't think it's going to impact. In terms of students who are taking a gap year and applying, if they haven't been admitted and if they're applying for next year, obviously they're in the same pool as students graduating next year and applying. So you're all in it together at that time. I will throw one caveat out there. Even if it's not a selective university, and what I mean selective, like the Harvards and the Yales and things like that, that are very, very small incoming classes. Even at universities across the board, there may be programs that are impacted. What I mean by that is, let's say you want to apply for a computer science program at, say, San Jose State University. I know for a fact that it's an impacted program, wherein a lot of applications come in for that particular program, and they can't take in too many students because they also have to manage faculty loads, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of reasons. So if this year 100 students were going to apply to San Jose State for a computer science master's program deferred, and they apply next year, now there's additional competition for that. In those cases, there may be a challenge, or there may be a slight challenge for you and your ability to get into a program that may be impacted. So again, this is personal, this is individual. So I urge you to reach out to us as soon as possible so we can start helping you build a plan and execute that plan, and make sure that you go to iamfutureready.com. And we want to help you. That's why we're doing this. We want to do this. We've been doing this for years. We want to help you, and we do everything we do for free. So any questions, any concerns, any issues you have, reach out to us so we can address it individually.
So we have a question from a student looking for admissions in the year of 2021.
Okay.
They would like to know, what is the state of admissions in the UK, Australia, Hong Kong, and Singapore?
Yeah. Again, I would say, first and foremost, I'm not an expert on those systems, so I can't get into detail about what's going on with them right now, or what they might do in the fall of 21. But we do have a team on the ground in India, all the people that you saw earlier. Some of them are experts in separate parts of the world. So we would refer you to the right person within our team to help you with that. But having said that, I will tell you this. Every country, every university system, Canada, the UK, Australia, New Zealand, Singapore, Hong Kong, anybody that you can think of, even the European countries, are all dealing with the same issues. Right now, their first and foremost concern is safety and security of the students they have on campus, or that they had on campus. Their next focus is to make sure that the semester is taught out, to make sure that the courses are delivered, make sure that the students who are supposed to graduate this year are graduating on time. So there's a lot of things. And then obviously, it's the summer. What are they going to do? Summer programs are impacted. Summer study abroad programs are impacted. So a lot of those concerns that need to be addressed then. And then obviously fall of 2020, all the work and effort that they've put in the last year or so, preparing for that class, building that class, which is going to be impacted for sure. So they have to address those issues. So as much as we would love for them to answer questions about fall of 21, heck, I don't even know what I'll be doing fall of 21, so I can't expect a university with thousands of students to be able to address that. But I'll go back to what I said at the beginning. This isn't new to universities in terms of managing crisis. This may be a bigger blow than in the past, but I will tell you that these university staff, faculty, administrators are working, days, weeks, year round, they're going to be working on this, making sure that they have the right solutions. Right now, I know everybody's working from home. And as a matter of fact, they're working extra hours every day to find solutions, to make sure that they offer the best solution that's the safest solution for all their students, whether you're a current student now or a student matriculating in the fall of 2020 or beyond. So work with us, let's work with them and try to figure out all the answers for your individual situations, even if it's a Hong Kong university or a Singaporean university.
So we have a question about registering for fall 2020 classes now or waiting until the end of April.
Okay, really depends on the institution. I can't imagine that there's an institution right now allowing students to register for classes for fall 2020 already. Again, this reminds me to make another comment, right? So typically, several universities have some deadlines in terms of when you need to accept their admissions offer. Used to be May 1st. May 1st used to be this universal acceptance day. Many cases, they have been postponed to June 1, and in some cases, I heard they're postponing to July 1, given the current crisis. Having said that, I would be surprised that the university would be offering enrollment for fall 2020 classes yet. If they are, we would love to understand who it is and maybe learn from them specifically what they're offering and guide you accordingly. So please reach out to us or email us at future@gennexeducation.com and we will help answer that question.
Okay, so we have a question related to online learning.
Mm-hmm.
How will the online classroom sessions go on, given the time zone difference between US and international countries?
Yeah, well, great question. And I think I was trying to allude to it earlier, saying that in the last several weeks, universities had to scramble and get all of their classes online. So not necessarily maybe conducive to delivery of courses across time zones. But as they prepare for fall, and I do know this because I have been in conversation with several universities over the last several weeks, is as they're preparing and planning for fall 2020, and the eventuality that they may have to deliver courses online, they also recognize that they may have to deliver courses online for students in other time zones. So as much as they will have some synchronous classes, they will also offer some asynchronous courses where a student in India doesn't have to be up at 2 a.m. taking a class just because it's not conducive for learning. So they will work and make sure that they offer courses, whether it is a faculty member getting up really early in the morning or staying late or delivering a course late at night. Right now, you could be doing a class, right? It's about 7:30 in India right now. So there are plans in place, nothing's concrete, but I will tell you this, if a university decides that they're going to extend online coursework for international students, I will bet you that they will offer courses that are conducive in those time zones.
Okay, so we have a kind of delayed start hypothetical. If I decide to start my master's in spring, are my total credits distributed across the remaining 3 semesters?
It doesn't exactly work that way. I don't think you can just come in. Like I said earlier, master's programs typically work sequentially, especially if it's a 2-year, a year program even. So you might have to take certain courses before you can take certain other courses. So you can't just come in the spring of 2021 and take 6 courses, because typically on average, a master's students might take 3 courses a semester. So you can't just come in and take 6 courses. One, courses might have to be sequential, so you have to finish the first course before you take a second one. 2, course load is going to be way too much for you to kind of add on. if your program is a program where you can take a course, or you can start in the spring of 21 and continue over a period of 2 years and take all the courses necessary to graduate, you could probably do that. And might end up finishing in December as opposed to a May semester. You know what I mean, right? So the full 2 years. There could be a possibility also, given this crisis, that the universities might offer more summer courses in the summer of 21 to help you catch up. So basically, what you could have done in the fall of 2020 and the spring of 21 could be moved over, where you would start in the spring of 21 and summer of 21. So by the time you come to fall of 21, you're on track to be in the second year. So basically, you'll graduate summer of 20 or May of 22, right? So that could also possibly happen, right? But again, we don't know yet, but that's something to keep an eye out for. If I was a university administrator, if I was a dean of a graduate school, those are the kinds of things that I would be planning for right now, because I know these are the kinds of issues and questions that students will have. We want to keep everybody on track. So that's what I would be thinking. So if I'm thinking that, I'm sure a lot of people around this country are thinking the same.
So how will the current situation affect TA or RA opportunities and internships in the summer? Additionally, will the recession affect such opportunities?
In terms of the opportunities, if it's a university providing a research or a teaching assistantship opportunity, whether you start in the fall of 20 or spring of 21, they will still need the RAs, they will still need the TAs, and I think those opportunities will still exist. In terms of summer internships, now, like as I was talking earlier, a few minutes ago, about moving courses. So let's assume that you end up doing something like that, where you start in the spring of 21 and you're taking classes in the summer of 21. Because you're taking a full course load in the summer of 21 might impact your ability to go do a full-time internship out there. So a lot of it will have to be calculated on a personal basis, right? So to me, the question would be, is the internship more important as an experience, or me finishing in that 2-year cycle by May of 22 important? What's more of a priority? I don't know. Personally, I would lean toward the internship, because that's work experience, that's future job opportunities. Some other students might be focused more on the academics and say, you know what, I want to get my degree done fast. I want to graduate by May of 2022, which I'd originally planned. So really depends on a personal level, and you have to make those choices. In terms of the recession, I mean, I wouldn't say we're in a recession yet, but it is a huge economic impact, right? All over the world, not just here in the US, but all over the world. But at the end of the day, yes, the recession, it's not a recession yet, but if there was a recession, or the economic impact that's affecting our industries right now, would definitely have an impact on the available opportunities. But I'm an optimist, so I always look at the silver lining. I'm looking at the bright side. I'm looking at things like, all right, if I was a student, a company might be impacted severely, and they may have laid off people, they may have shrunk their workforce, but they still need to get work done, especially if they're kind of shut down right now. And if they come back online in the next few weeks, few months, they have to scramble to catch up. In that event, they need more people. Maybe it's better for them to have interns getting a lot more work done. Maybe they'll have more internships that way, right? Especially if they're trying to catch up. Even though they had laid off or furloughed a lot of their staff, they may need those staff back and additional staff to catch up, to make sure that their business runs normally. So I tend to look at the optimistic side of things and say, you know what, those are the opportunities that I'd be looking for, particularly in industries that may be in big demand now. I mean, right now, big demand is healthcare and med tech and pharmaceuticals and biotech. And so if you're in those areas, imagine the kinds of opportunities that may be open for you, when you're a student in terms of internship. So it's going to have an impact one way or another. I like to look at it positively. I like to be an optimist, like I said, and look at the bright side of things and plan and focus and explore opportunities like those that will for sure exist.
Okay, so we have a question from Yash. What if I have received the I-20 document earlier, so already I assume, but I have decided not to go this year? Do I need to request the I-20 again next year? Is there a validity of the I-20?
Sure. The I-20 form that's been issued is for that particular term, right? If you've been admitted for the fall of 2020, and that's the I-20 that they sent you, and if you're going to defer, you can't just ignore it. I wouldn't say just stuff it away and forget about it. I would strongly recommend that you reach out to university, excuse me, let them know that you've made a decision to defer your admission for a semester or a year, whatever you decide, and make sure that you have that communication in writing, and make sure that you talk to them specifically about receiving a new I-20 for a visa. You cannot use this I-20 for a future term. You can use this I-20 next year, and they can issue an I-20 for next year right now. They will issue one when the time is right. But make sure all of this communication happens in writing, so you have a trail, you have a thread, you have emails, and you document everything, and make sure you communicate. And if you need help, please reach out to us, and we'll make sure we'll help facilitate that.
Okay, and I think this may have been addressed earlier in the presentation, but again, for those who maybe were not here or missed out on that, my university is still expecting an official transcript mailed to them before issuing an I-20. Considering a lockdown, which I've told them about, it is impossible to do so. Your comments on next steps?
Yeah, in that case, I would say reach out to us personally. We'd like to help you with that situation because, like I said earlier, the universities that I'm in conversation with, our partners especially, and other universities that I've been talking to, are making as many accommodations as possible, realizing what's going on the ground. So if there's a particular university that's admitted you, but it's demanding a specific document that you cannot furnish, let us help you facilitate that conversation. So please reach out to us, and let's take care of the situation on a one-off basis on this side.
I want to add an interesting question a little bit down the line. If we start our education online in fall 2020, would the university provide an option to move on campus when travel and visas open up during the fall 2020 semester or later?
So I'm assuming the question is, if you start classes in, say, August, and by
I think so. Yeah.
Session, can you move?
Correct.
I mean, possibly, but to be honest with you, I don't know if any university would want to do that, where they would decide to deliver courses online for the semester and then mid-semester start moving courses on campus. That would be a huge undertaking, and I don't know if any university would want to do that. I mean, if I was the president of a university, I would definitely not want to do that. Just the work it takes to start on-campus courses, just the work it takes to move students into housing and faculty into offices and staff and everything. That is a huge undertaking. If they already planned for fall to be online, I think they're fully prepared for that. I would imagine if they do that, they wouldn't initiate on-campus courses till the spring of 21. But having said that, if there's a university brave enough to do that, then kudos to them. And I guess if you have an opportunity to do that, again, if you're an international student, if you don't have a visa, all of those things into consideration as well. University might open on-campus courses, say in October or November of this year, but you still have to be able to go get a visa and plan and pack and all of that. And if that's not feasible, then it's really a moot point.
Okay, let's see here. I'm trying to see, we've got a number of questions that are sort of similar, kind of derivatives of ones we've already addressed. So trying to find some new topics here to make sure we're we're adding. So here, how is the recession going to affect our chances of obtaining an internship during the OPT if we decide to go for fall 2020, spring 2021 semester?
Yeah, like I said earlier, there's no recession yet, but there has been a huge economic impact. Some industries are obviously more impacted than others, as you can imagine, as they are worldwide. If you're an undergraduate student coming in to start a coursework, fall 2020, spring 21, whatever it is, we're talking 4.5 years, 5 years from now, where you're going to be looking at OPT. So I wouldn't worry that far ahead. If you're a master's student, obviously the timeline's a little bit shorter. You're going to be looking at it summer of 22, I think. So again, I can't really predict what's going to happen. Like I said earlier, I think there are going to be industries that are going to fare much better on the back end of this pandemic than others. If I were to just guess, I would say obviously hospitality industry is going to be majorly impacted. It already is. And if you are in a hospitality program, there might be challenges. But again, once things go back to some semblance of normalcy, people are going to travel. I am looking forward to it personally. So I'm going to stay at a hotel. I'm going to eat at a restaurant. So things will come back. And even if you're a hospitality student, you will have opportunities in those sectors. But obviously, if you're in other sectors, especially in healthcare and medtech and bioengineering, et cetera, those kinds of programs, I think those industries are going to definitely grow. Public health, I think I've actually seen, conversations the last few weeks that there's a lot more interest in public health programs. In the past, people would have kind of discounted a master's in public health, but this is a great time to actually think about that, I think, given what these public health professionals do. So a lot of industries are going to be impacted, but you'll see a lot of interest in non-traditional areas of study because of what people are starting to realize in terms of who's out there, what kind of opportunities exist in the world, who are the professionals doing the kinds of things that would have been, to us, there were ghosts doing things on the back. Nobody really talked about public health officials up until this pandemic happened. So maybe courses like that might be something that you want to consider pursuing. So a lot will happen, a lot will change. But I will tell you this for a fact. Your opportunity for a global education, you giving yourself that opportunity is probably one of the best decisions you will ever make in your life. So just because coronavirus and just because the pandemic, just because there's a delay or there's a disruption and you can't start in the fall, you might have to defer till the spring or maybe fall of 21, does not mean that you take that off your plate. I cannot impress upon you the importance of a global education, especially in times of crisis like this, the kinds of experiences and the education that you'll get. I'm a big proponent of it. Obviously, that's why we do what we do. So keep at it. Make sure you stay on track. We want to help you with this. So even though there's a lot of confusion, even though there's a lot of disruption right now, and there's a lot of uncertainty, and I don't think I gave you a lot of clarity today, but as I'm speaking, I'm getting some more clarity in my own head. So I'm hoping I'm offering that to you as well. So just know that this is an excellent opportunity. So don't give up on it, even if you may have to shift plans a little bit. So that's one thing that I did absolutely want to share this morning.
So an exam related question. If CBSE cancels class 12 examinations and gives progression to students based on predicted scores, how will U.S. universities assess that?
Like I've said earlier, I think the universities increasingly are looking at boards, right? Whether you're a CBSE or an ISC board, or even an IB or an IGCSE Cambridge board. All of these boards are making decisions daily, right? We just saw guidance from the IB board. We just saw guidance from the Cambridge board, excuse me, in terms of what they are directing high schools to do in terms of how they are supposed to graduate students. So if CBSE decides that based on your coursework thus far, based on marks that you've got on a midterm, et cetera, you will be provided a a final score and a grade, which will then base your graduation on. That's what the university will take. As long as it's a board decision, as long as it's a directive from the board, in the curriculum that you're attending, the university will accept that as the admissions criteria, right? So hopefully everybody did well on their midterms and not waited for a final exam score to get that A. So if nothing else, I know I'm joking here, but if nothing else, it's a lesson. Don't always wait for the final exam score. So do well throughout the year, study hard.
So I think this may be similar to another question we had, but taking a slightly different angle. Will international students be at a disadvantage when it comes to getting off a wait list because of the current situation?
I don't think I would make a blanket statement saying that the international students will be at a disadvantage. A university that processes applications and has wait list applications, they do it across the board, right? So those selective universities are trying to fill a class. And the class could be made up of a lot of different elements, right? So they look at students across the board, domestic, international, and try to make a class. So if you are on a wait list at a university, I don't think at this point the university's decision on how they would remove a student from a wait list is any different than 3 months ago, 6 months ago, last year, right? They're still following the same protocols. As and when they make decisions and as and when they get early decision students accepting the offer, that's when they start to look at their waitlist applicants and make decisions. Now, the only caveat is, like I said earlier, May 1 used to be the decision deadline for students to commit. It used to be commitment day. May 1 used to be when all the students would commit to a particular university, and that's when the universities would know how their class is faring, right? This year, because it's been delayed a little bit, or they're pushing those dates back to accommodate for the pandemic, the wait list students might also experience some kind of a delay in terms of whether or not they come off the wait list. It's very university specific. So I'll go back to what I said earlier. If you have specific questions on that, reach out to university and ask them. But I'll warn you again, if you're sending them an email, 1,000 other students are sending them an email, and they cannot respond to all of you. So keep an eye out for communication with the universities. Make sure you visit your university website as frequently as possible, because things are changing by the hour, by the day. And they're doing the best they can to update their websites to communicate that information to you. So make sure you go on their website once every 3 or 4 days.
So we have 2 consecutive questions that kind of get at deferral.
Mm-hmm.
I want to go with the first one because I think it will capture the other as well. You will in your response. For universities with April 15th decision deadlines, or as you've mentioned earlier, many of those, some of them are pushing those back, are financial aid packages, for example, federal loans, grants, etc., expected to be accepted or declined by that date, even with the possibility of not attending later on? If we accept the offers and later decide not to attend due to COVID-19 related issues, what would be the consequences of that?
Oh, that's a great question. Obviously, if you applied for early decision and that you're offered admission, the standard was that you accept that offer and enroll on campus. But again, I think this pandemic has kind of thrown a lot of wrenches in a lot of different standard expectations. And I'm not an expert on financial aid or in terms of what packages are offered and what the universities are expecting. I would say, I know I'm repeating myself, but I'll say the same thing. These are situations that are continuously changing. The universities probably don't even know the answer to some of these questions yet. But if you are worried about that April 15th acceptance of a financial package and then deciding not to come because of a pandemic, obviously there's a lot more leeway this year for decisions you may make or the decisions the universities may make. So before you make decisions, make sure you get clarity on it from your particular university. And again, if you write them an email and if they don't respond, unfortunately, they're probably too busy and they can't respond yet, but keep an eye out for them. If you're struggling to get a response, or if you're struggling to find information specific to your situation, please reach out to us. Email us at thefuture@gennexeducation.com. We will do our very best to try to find those answers for you and identify people on campus that we can personally reach out to get you the answer. Like I said earlier, 1,000 students emailing a university representative might be difficult for them to respond to. But me or one of my colleagues from GenNext reaching out to them, they may be a little bit more easier to access and they may respond to it a little bit sooner. So let's try to work on this together and get the answers that you need. Was there a second question, Andy? You said there were 2 questions related to that.
Yeah, and I think you really got at it. The other question's a little bit more general about whether a deferral would even be granted if they wanted to, as you know, if they were sort of put off by the situation related to the coronavirus.
Yeah, and I'll say the same thing. I think conditions are so different this year than in the past, that what in the past was, not feasible is feasible now. I mean, case in point, you could never ship an I-20, never email an I-20 to a student. It would always have to be a hard copy of the I-20 shipped. But this year, it's feasible. So a lot of things are being made feasible. Technology is obviously helping a lot of it, but also conditions warrant that universities and even the U.S. government and other governments, I'm sure, accommodate because of the pandemic.
So another question that again, we may have addressed earlier, but I think is an important one. And if anyone came in later, I want to make sure that they get the answer they need. What will be the effect of the coronavirus on the number of F1 visas issued in the fall? Will they even be distributed at all?
In terms of are they even going to be issuing F1 visas for fall of 2020, that depends on how soon the State Department opens the embassies around the world. As of right now, not only has the State Department closed the embassies, but India is in a lockdown. Now, I know India's lockdown is supposed to end pretty soon here, but what if there's an extension to that? By default, if there's an extension to the lockdown, then the embassies cannot function and you cannot go get a visa. Now, that we're still in April, so we're talking about April, May. Let's assume by June or July, everything's back online and we've gone through this pandemic and the embassies start to open. Now, the next question would be, how many more appointments will they offer to make up for being shut down for all these weeks and months? We don't know, right? I mean, there's a limit as how many they can do each day. So a lot of it depends on what the State Department does. So we just have to wait and watch. If the embassies are able to open in a timely manner, I would say they're going to issue as many visas as they possibly can so that students can still make the fall 2020 start on campus. How late can I go? I mean, typically students need to be here late August, early September. I have known cases in the past where a student received a visa a week before showing up on campus. Actually happened to me years ago when I first came. So it's feasible that a student could still get an appointment in early mid-August, get a visa, and then hop on a plane and come start end of August, early September. But it all depends on how soon everything can go back online. Obviously, if for some reason embassies are staying shut and things are on lockdown and various levels and you cannot go get a visa, you cannot come to the US or you cannot go travel to your destination country, which means you may have to defer to the spring or worst case, fall of 21.
Okay, we have just a few final ones. Some of them are aspects of them are repeating some things that we covered earlier. How will the application be looked at if there is no standardized test score and an official transcript?
Mhm. In terms of official transcripts, I mean, at the end of the day, like I said before, if your board, whichever board you're studying in, makes some determination and provides a directive to the schools to say, here's how you will graduate your students, or here's how you will grade your students to provide their final grades for the year, universities will accept that as a admission criteria or an admissibility standpoint, right? So that's one thing. As long as you can submit information that your board is offering, even if it's not an official transcript, anything you can as it comes as a directive from your board, the universities will accept, right? In terms of standardized testing, given the disruption and given the challenges, like I said earlier, more and more universities are going test optional, which means they're basically saying for the class of 2020, and in some cases, they've already made the determination for 2021. And in one case, I saw a couple of days ago that for the next 3 years, they are running a trial without requesting a standardized test, an ACT or SAT, right? This applies to the undergrad students. If that's the case, then the university is going to make the admissions decision, obviously based on your 9th, and 10th, and 11th grade scores, any predicted scores you have, or any final grades you can get from your school as directed by the board as their admission criteria. And obviously, the schools that look at holistic admissions criteria in terms of your essay, letters of recommendation. I mean, there could be disruption in that as well. You may not be able to get to your teachers or your coaches to write a letter of recommendation. And if that's the case, and I think that's something that you need to be able to communicate with the universities to let them know the challenges with that. Given the conditions, I will tell you this, the universities are very open. They are making decisions daily and weekly to try to accommodate all of the disruptions you're facing. So if that's the case, and if they've articulated that they do not require a standardized test like the SAT, ACT, or in some cases the GRE, GMAT, then you're okay. You don't have to worry about that. If a university still requires that, that's a challenge, obviously, since you cannot appear for that test. That may force you into a decision where if you're absolutely certain that you want to apply to that university and wait for a decision, you cannot take the standardized test, then you may have to wait till those standardized tests are offered in the near future so you can submit a score, and maybe you may have to defer your admission till the spring of 21 or worst case fall of 20.
So we've got an interesting question related to GRE scores. Can universities ask for GRE scores after they have waived the requirement due to the COVID-19 crisis? And I would imagine this could also be extended, down to the undergraduate level if there's the possibility that universities who are waiving things, can they reinstate that requirement?
I don't even know if it's legal to do that. If a university publishes information about admission criteria, and if that admissions criteria for fall 20 or spring 21, fall 21, whichever term you're applying for, clearly indicates that your admissions will be based on X, Y, and Z requirement, which does not include a standardized exam score like an SAT, ACT, GRE, GMAT, etc. Once you've been admitted, they can't come back to you and say, oh, you know what, we're going to wait till you take this exam because we've added that as an admission criteria. I don't think any university in their right mind would do that. Like I said earlier, it might not even be legal for them to do that. So I'm not a legal scholar, but I would guess from my standpoint, you cannot require something as an admission standard once you've waived that or once you've communicated that that's not a requirement. Now, I will add, if a university has determined that they don't need a GRE or GMAT, ACT, SAT for this term or spring 21, fall 21, which is fine. But let's say you're applying for a fall 22, they may bring back that requirement based on conditions at that point as a university. Now, because you're applying for that term, for each term that you apply, whatever criteria is listed in their admissions material in their websites, that's what's expected. They can't come in and then request additional admissions criteria for
Okay, and we had a question about sort of when F1 visas are being issued, will they receive priority over other types of visas? For instance, H-1Bs, J-1s.
I'm assuming this is a question in terms of availability of interviews.
I believe so, yes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to be honest, I don't know. I don't know what the current trend of how they prioritize F1 appointments versus other visa types. I don't think the State Department would say, hey, we place a higher priority on students coming here as opposed to workers coming here or scholars coming here, which is what the J-1 visa is for. I doubt that, because obviously in our world, F1 is paramount. It's the most important visa. All of the work we do is around students and universities, et cetera. But as a country, as a Department of State, I would imagine that's not their number one priority, right? They're looking at it across the board. I would imagine that the same breakdown, or I don't even know how they allocate appointment times. If there was a system where they were allocating appointment times or percentages of time for different visa categories, I would imagine they'd probably keep it the same. I don't see any compelling reason for them to do that, unless through work that as a university community here, through our national organizations, we appeal to the State Department to increase that, which may very well happen, where we may all, as a community of international educators, might appeal to the State Department to say, hey, it's July, we have a time restriction for students to be able to come attend college. So can you suspend or hold on some of the other visa types and just give a priority to F1 visas? That could potentially happen. Actually, that's a great idea. Maybe I should recommend that our international education organization, NAFSA, maybe look into that. Maybe I'll reach out to the NAFSA and see if that's even a feasibility.
Okay, and then this is an interesting question, again, GRE related. Where GRE scores are optional, do applicants with a GRE score have an advantage over those without those scores? Again, I think that this could be applied potentially down towards the undergraduate level as well.
Yeah. I mean, if a university has a test optional policy, I don't think a university would consider or give any weight to a test score. If their process has been determined to be grades and other criteria, and if a test as a standardized test is optional, just because you take the test doesn't give you a leg up. At least I don't think it should. I don't think it will. Obviously, when universities, and some universities say this, they say it's test optional, but if you have a score, turn it in, because they may consider that for scholarship purposes. Or if it comes down to a situation where they may have to, decide on, some additional criteria. Let's say if you're a graduate student applying for an RA position or a TA position, maybe the department might say, hey, if the student has taken a GRE or a GMAT, we may look at that score. But you have to think about it in terms of admission standard, admission standard and everything else. The admission standard and criteria is what the university communicates, right? So they can't say that we don't take the SAT or GRE score and then give those students a leg up or an advantage because they took the score, because that's not fair for other students who don't submit a test score because the university told them they don't need it.
All right, and that was our final question for this evening. Right. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, again, thank you very much for your time. I really hope that we were able to at least provide some insight and allay some of your fears or concerns or and confusion. So, like I said earlier, we are shooting in the dark. We are still trying to figure out what's going on. Expect a lot more communication from us. We will be emailing out updates. We will be WhatsApping out messages, so make sure you keep an eye on all of those. And in the next few weeks, we may very well have another webinar to address any updates or situations as they arise. So once again, on behalf of our university partners and behalf of our team at GenNext, I want to thank you for this opportunity. I look forward to working with all of you to help you individually. So make sure you reach out to us. I'm going to flip back to the screen again. Go online and register at iamfutureready.com, or definitely email us at that email address, and make sure you save the WhatsApp number on your phone, because we're going to be leveraging WhatsApp quite a bit to communicate with you. Thank you all so much. I expect to hear from many of you, and if you have questions, please email us. And like I said earlier, individual questions that are personal, we want to be able to answer those specifically with you, with your case in mind. So please reach out to us. Again, thank you very much. Have a great night, and we'll look forward to talking to you soon. Take care.